It's a great honor to be asked to do this and to join you on this very auspicious occasion of launching your illicit trade group. And it's wonderful to see such a multidisciplinary center. And I and the center that I work with that does so much on illicit trade as well look forward to collaborating with you. I think what you've identified and we've been looking at for a long time are central issues that really affect the future of our planet. I was asked to talk about sustainability, but when I pursued this conversation, I also learned that the central themes of your university are also health issues and energy issues, and illicit trade affects those as well. So as you'll see in the next slide, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about human security and health, which we've already mentioned today with the pandemic. Energy security, we've talked a little bit about the challenges of climate change, which are intimately related to the problems of sustainability. I think the reason that I was asked to give this call is that 2 years ago, I published a book called Dark Commerce: How a New Illicit Economy is Threatening Our Future. And as was presented in your introduction, I didn't look at illicit trade in terms of the traditional topics that are often dominate this discussion, as was said, narcotics, counterfeiting, but how this illicit economy is undermining and threatening the sustainability of the planet, and how, as we've mentioned previously today, how cybercrime, online platforms and social media have accelerated illicit trade globally. So yes, this is a discussion, as was presented, that looks at the dark side of globalization, and it looks at it in so many different areas. And so it's wonderful to see a group with dozens of people of different disciplines, because that's what it's going to take to address this phenomenon. I'm happy to say that next week the book comes out in paperback. So we talked a little bit today about the pandemic that we're already in and the problems also of counterfeit medicines. But this is not just a problem of groups that are territorially based, as was mentioned in Italy, but there is an active trade online of counterfeit medicines. And there are tens of thousands of websites that sell pharmaceuticals without prescriptions, that have no authorization to sell medicines. And many of them are not quality medicines. But these pharmaceutical illicit entrepreneurs are very flexible. And so they're now selling counterfeit PPE, especially masks, that do not protect users against COVID. And we'll also talk a little bit about fentanyl and other deadly drugs that are sold through the open web and also through the dark web. But principal form of sale is in readily accessible websites. Here's a slide that was prepared by specialists on illicit pharmacies. And you can see that this is a problem that is in the tens of thousands of websites. There are 30 to 35,000 websites that are operating at any time. And there are believed to be about 2,000 to 3,000 illicit merchants behind these websites. And this is really a global problem, as you can see through the data. I've also been looking looking at the sale of online fentanyl products and trying to trace the networks, the source, and the delivery points of this fentanyl trade. It is interesting that the fentanyl trade has also been closely tied to the events of the last few months of this pandemic, because as our research revealed by doing scraping of online websites and then going into registries and matching them up with illicit trade data, is that we found that one of the major producers of illicit fentanyl is a Chinese producer based in Wuhan, which is also where the pandemic originated. So we can see here that in February, where I have the red circle, production was halted temporarily, and also sales of this fentanyl worldwide. But in the slide that's not circled, you can see that by March, the sales were up and going again. And we've talked a lot today about illicit financial flows, but many of these payments are not just going through cryptocurrencies. Many of them are going through online credit card payments, transfer services such as Western Union. So there are many ways that this illicit trade intersects with the legitimate economy, because the chemicals are being produced in legitimate factories, some of which even get government subsidies, and they're moving through the global financial system, the legitimate global financial system. I should also point out that Wuhan and the pandemic may also be related to an illicit trade in animals, and that suggests that we are looking at a very severe health consequence of this illicit trade that has affected the entire world. As I learned, energy is one of the main foci of Groningen University, and we have terrorist groups such as ISIS and Boko Haram that have profited from the sale of oil. You can see a young ISIS member involved with pipelines, and he's inside of one of an oil refinery complex, and ISIS at its height made $500 million annually from illicit sales, and Boko Haram has blown up and diverted oil out of pipelines in Nigeria. This illicit trade in energy is also going on in Mexico. The Zetas, one of the major crime groups there, have moved into the oil and gasoline sector. They hijack these trucks. They target storage facilities and pipelines. So this is also a way that illicit trade affects one of the key concerns that your community is thinking about. But let's go primarily to the issue of sustainability, which is what I was asked to talk about. After I wrote my book, Dark Commerce, there was a global assessment report out of the United Nations on biodiversity and ecosystems that was released in May of 2019. And it warned that in the next decades, we're going to see the extinction of 1 million species. And the report suggests ways to build a more sustainable environment and focus on global and financial systems. But in this report, they never mention the role of dark commerce, illicit trade, or corruption that need to be addressed to stem the rates of extinction. Which brings me to this picture. In English, we always talk about the missing 800-pound gorilla in the room. That's this phenomenon that is so big, you can't ignore it. So I found this charming picture of these gorillas posing for a picture, but that's not the way you usually see gorillas. The reason that these gorillas are posing for a picture is that they have been raised basically in a gorilla shelter after their mother was killed by poachers. So our 800-pound gorilla on illicit trade is also manifested in the hard life that many gorillas are facing today, as illicit trade undermines their families and undermines the reproductive structures for the future of gorillas. We also talk today about conflict. And conflict is a large part of the problem. There has been some very, very good research done by scientists that shows that where the most intense conflict is going on in the world is also areas of the greatest biodiversity on the planet. So we're having a threat and threats to the species and our diversity because these conflicts are often sustained by illicit trade in the most key elements of diversity of our planet. But conflict is just a part of the picture. There is an enormous rise of consumer demand. Up until the pandemic, we were having rising middle classes in many parts of the world, undermining sustainability of fish, timber, water, resources, wildlife, as people were making more demands for these products as they have a higher standard of living. So I called this in the book the problem of the time-sensitive planet, because our planet only has a certain amount of natural resources. Maybe we can find ways through renewable energy to generate energy, but we're not finding new ways to generate fish and timber. And therefore, we are taking these products off the planet at a greater rate than they are reproducing. And that's why we're dealing with a time-sensitive planet that is running out of its natural resources in fish and timber. And if you think about what is happening with global, with forest fires this year, and how that is so fast, as I mentioned, is on platforms and especially social media, much of it which is encrypted and is facilitating the illicit trade. So over the last 3 decades, since the rise of cyberspace, we are seeing massive transformation in the problems of illicit trade and the ability to move finances readily that was not so apparent before this new period of globalization. So look at some of the major areas in which illicit trade affects sustainability. I've just listed some of the most important, and I will show you pictures illustrating some of them. So we have illegal deforestation and illegal charcoal trade. We have IUU fishing, which is fishing outside of accepted legal norms, which is estimated in many regions of the world to be at least 1/3 of all of the fish that is caught. Illicit mining, the gold mining puts harmful chemicals in the water. Coltan is absolutely central to cell phones and computers, and many people are being killed collecting this coltan. As I say in my book, we have cell phones that are killing people. There's problems of illegal pesticides and counterfeit seeds that are destroying soil and killing animals and also killing humans. Illegal food and beverage. For example, mezcal is a slow-growing plant in the deserts of Mexico, and it's being chopped down en masse to make mezcal. We have sand and water mafias, and the sand mafias are removing sand from the coast of India, and the Bay of Bengal is one of the centers of problems of climate change and rising waters. We have problems of wildlife poaching, hijacking of carbon markets, which I'll explain a little bit more. And also we need to think about legitimate producers such as VW and other diesel producers that deliberately undermine emission standards. So one UN study reported that the categories of environmental crime are growing at 5 to 7% annually. That's larger than overall rates of global trade by a significant percentage. Much of this is tied to organized crime and corruption, but I don't want us to be blaming only organized crime and corruption, because as we'll see, we have legitimate companies, as I've already mentioned, that take part of it. And for certain categories of animals where there has been increasing poaching, such as the rhino, you can see from this chart that there has just been exponential growth in rhino horn that drives the animals to extinction because it is killing the animals and undermining the diversity of the gene pool. In my book, Dark Commerce, I define this problem as dysfunctional selection. It's dysfunctional because the animals are needed and killing them harms many more parts of the habitat than just the animals, and the individuals who are engaged in this trade do not use it to develop other businesses, but dissipate the money. And so there are no winners in this trade. This is a picture of dysfunctional selection where you have a massacred rhino. They usually cannot survive after their horn has been removed. They bleed to death. And the picture of this young woman with a rifle is an example of how trafficked women are used to disguise and legitimize rhino hunts that individuals pay for. And so we have a convergence of two kinds of crime, human trafficking and illicit wildlife trade. And the woman has both her body violated and her identity misused. Here's some pictures of illegal deforestation. And then look at this building here. This is the Lincoln Building, which is the Seattle headquarters of the FBI field office. The FBI is the organization in the United States responsible for fighting corruption. But who owns this building? This is laundered money from the leader of Borneo, Sarawak, who deforested 80% of the rainforests of the territory that he governed and moved the billions of profits all over the world into a building like this. And I can talk about this because the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, did a report saying we have to be careful, the US government, of where you are renting facilities because you may be aiding kleptocrats and undermining national security. And here is deforestation for an illegal charcoal trade that has been a key funding source for Al-Shabaab. Here we have illegal fishing, which is an enormous problem throughout the world. We have illegal fishing ships, and the men that you can see in the picture have been sold into basically slavery at sea because much of this illicit fishing is going on and aided by human trafficking. Because when the ships are caught or abandoned, they just forget about the people. They are disposable people. So we're looking at convergence of problems. And you talked about having webinars at your center. We're going to be having a webinar in about 2 weeks, looking at big data that helps us understand illicit fishing, illegal fishing, IUU fishing, and what can be done about it. So I hope many of you in the future will join our webinars because we are doing these on sort of burning global issues of illicit trade. Here is a slide from India and how significant is the problem of illegal and counterfeit pesticides. And this is representing about 30% of the market. When farmers use these, often the crops die and they've gone into debt. So if you're reading about the suicides of farmers in India, part of it is explained by this trade in illegal and counterfeit pesticides. But it's not just a problem of India. There are European estimates that in Northeastern Europe, the 25% of the pesticides that are entering European markets are illicit and harmful. Here we have illicit e-waste dumping. So this is your computer is not being properly dumped. It is brought often to a country in West Africa and burned, releasing harmful chemicals into the air and leading to the premature death of these people who are involved in disposing of this illicit e-waste. Here are pictures of water mafias that exist in Central America, India, Pakistan, one of my doctoral students from Pakistan showed how this was just a central feature of life in Karachi and undermined the life and the welfare of the most vulnerable in this enormous city. So, and this is a very interesting slide. A few years ago, Europe set up a carbon trading market, but did not protect against the criminalization of this market. And as a result of this, the shares that were connected to this illicit carbon market were hacked by a variety of actors and then sold by others. So as you can see, we're looking at, this is a German wanted sign, and there's some rather unusual people listed here. When US forces went into Afghanistan, they found records of terror groups participating in hijacking the carbon trade market. So we have here criminals, we have officials of Deutsche Bank who were convicted of involvement in the illicit carbon trade. We've got corrupt officials. And so we have a convergence of different actors involved in illicit trade. But you can be sure as we try and make this planet sustainable, which is one of our greatest challenges for humanity in the coming decades, the criminals, the corrupt officials, corrupt business people will be at the front lines of trying to undermine the efforts that we put in to make a more sustainable planet. So let me conclude with what we can do. And some discussion was made by the speaker from UNICRI, from your university, on what we can do. And there's much that can be done on supply chain transparency, data analytics to mine for suspicious transactions, pushing for social and corporate responsibility, having large companies like Google and others helping monitor IUU phishing, more attention to free trade zones that are major transshipment points and make them use blockchain and other technology to monitor goods that are transited. And there needs to be much more attention to e-permitting in CITES to help eliminate illicit trade, because unfortunately, this process is often corrupted. One of the things that we're doing at TRAC now is an analysis of mirror trade data, of understanding the data that has of the wood that is leaving Peru. And then so we had in a webinar that you can watch, 80% of the wood that's leaving Peru, the timber, is illegally cut, and it is depleting the Amazon, which is what we need to maintain the sustainability of the planet. But there's much that can be done through big data analytics to try and understand where this timber is going and then target to try and stop this trade. We need to hold financial institutions and personnel responsible, just as the German courts did with the Deutsche Bank personnel that were involved in hijacking the carbon trade. We need to develop partnerships on monitoring suspicious data. This has been done effectively in different parts of the world with the anti-human trafficking community, and it needs to be expanded on illicit trade. We need to end beneficial ownership, anonymity, shell companies that allow individuals to hide the vast profits of this crime, and also place more controls over money laundering into real estate. Some of this may not be the most significant problems in the Netherlands, but they are certainly enormous problems globally. But there are problems, as I have a research project with the NSF now, or funded by the NSF, on illicit trade in fentanyl and PPE. And some of this trade is going on harmful trade on platforms hosted in the Netherlands. So there are areas that you can be working on, and my collaborator has worked with Dutch data that's been provided to him by the authorities to help understand these processes. But what we most need to understand as a community that will work together, that if we don't deal with the illicit trade, there will be no life and no jobs on a dead planet. And therefore, people who say, well, we need this, we need to do this because we need this for our economy, are being very short-sighted. And maybe we will not face these crises in so much in our lives, maybe you will more as younger than I am, but this is certainly a deadly trajectory for our children and our grandchildren, if it even takes that long. So I commend your efforts, and I really look forward to visiting you as soon as we can travel, and of collaborating with you and sharing with you on webinars and other ways that we can communicate. Thank you.